Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz. Brandis Friedman has the evening off. On the show tonight,
Mr. Smollett did exactly what we said he did.
A special prosecutor finds major failure in how the Cook County State's Attorney's Office handled the Jussie Smollett case.
I know that people are scared.
Mayor Lightfoot unveils a crime-fighting strategy, but will her plans get off the ground?
There's a lot of talk over the years about actually demolishing the building, which would be a travesty.
A new deal's in the works to save and overhaul the Thompson Center, how the redevelopment could change the iconic building.
I took a bite, had to spit it out because it tasted like nothing I had ever tasted before.
We check in on some COVID long haulers as doctors are still searching for answers behind their symptoms. Amtrak cranks up the speed between Chicago and St. Louis. That and more business headlines from Cranes. NASA prepares to launch the most powerful space telescope ever. Local astronomers share some up-close details. We head to Wicker Park to introduce you to the artist behind 100 Zoom portraits. Plus, a roundup of holiday shows and how theaters in Chicago are dealing with this latest COVID outbreak. But first, some of today's top stories. Mayor Lori Lightfoot is calling for federal help to assist with Chicago's violence. She's asking Attorney General Merrick Garland to send more ATF agents, federal prosecutors, and marshals to help, as more than 800 people have been shot and killed this year in Chicago.
No excuses. We must do better. We have taken stock, analyzed the data, and we will be making the necessary changes going into the new year. But rest assured, none of us will rest until we bring peace to this city.
And we'll have more details on the mayor's announcements later in the show with Amanda Vinicky, so please stay tuned. Illinois hospitals are straining under the influx of coronavirus cases. Nearly 4,000 people with COVID-19 are currently in hospitals throughout the state, and that's the highest it's been since December 31st of 2020. There are 811 patients in the ICU, and that's the most since January 5th. And there are 432 patients with COVID on ventilators. Illinois public health officials are also reporting more than 12,000 new COVID cases. That's the largest one-day increase in the entire year. And there were 11 additional deaths reported today. Since the pandemic began, there's been more than 1.9 million total cases in the state, including 27,228 deaths. The 7-day statewide test positivity rate is 7.1%, a jump from 6.2% on Friday. The last time test positivity was reported that high was on January 17th. The FBI is expanding its probe of Loretto Hospital's distribution of COVID-19 vaccinations to a southwest suburban church. The Valley Kingdom Ministries International Church is reportedly connected to the hospital's CEO, George Miller. Hundreds of congregants were allegedly vaccinated there in February when shots were scarce. At the time, vaccines were only designated for people over 65 and essential frontline and healthcare workers. The FBI is also investigating vaccinations of ineligible workers at Trump Tower, where former hospital chief operating officer Dr. Anash Ahmed lived, and at a luxury watch shop where Ahmed was a frequent customer. The hospital's board decided to suspend Miller for 2 weeks without pay back in March, and Ahmed resigned. No criminal charges have yet been filed as a result of this probe. And up next, the findings of the newly released report on the state's attorney's handling of the Jussie Smollett case. So please stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
New details on the Cook County State's Attorney's handling of the original Jussie Smollett case. Judge Michael Tubman made the special prosecutor's full report available to the public today. The investigation into Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx and her office found, quote, major failure in the way this case was handled. WTTW News reporter Matt Masterson joins us now with more. And Matt, as a reminder for our viewers, this is probing why the state's attorney's office dropped that initial case so quickly without any admission of guilt for Mr. Smollett and very, very lenient conditions. So what are the big takeaways of this report?
Right. So the report's initial findings were released about a year ago, but this gave us a lot more detail into what went into that dismissal back in 2019. And essentially, Webb's office found that there were substantial abuses within Fox's office in making this move. It wasn't necessarily the product of any outside influence or some type of criminal misconduct, as had been speculated. It was still, as you said, some major failings that went in to this decision, including some false statements that were made to the public between Fox and some of her attorneys. So while it wasn't so much a Fox and Smollett issue, there was a lot of disarray that appeared to be going on within her office leading up to this case.
Very briefly, Matt, what were those false statements?
She made several statements about why the case was handled the way it was, that it was matching up with previous dispositions in her office, and her and one of the prosecutors in charge of the case, Joseph Magatz, both made comments to this effect immediately afterwards, trying to explain how this decision came to be so quickly after just within 3 weeks of this initial indictment being charged against Smollett back in 2019. And
reading through the report, Kim Foxx is interviewed by the special prosecutor. She recused herself from the case, and then she tells the prosecutor in this probe she was surprised that her lawyers did drop the case in the lenient manner they did, and figured that maybe they were just trying to get Smollett out of town. So does that square with what the probe found?
Well, she has repeatedly said that she had initially recused herself, informally recused herself from the case. So she said that she stepped away and left the case up to the prosecutors, her other assistant state's attorneys who were handling this case. Though what the report did find was that she was getting constant updates about this case from other attorneys in the office. And that doesn't necessarily track with the statement that she was surprised, because she was getting updates so often, which the report also found was surprising to other attorneys in the office, that she would recuse herself but still be getting these updates as regularly as she was.
So this probe, as it did a year ago, doesn't find any criminal wrongdoing with the state's attorney's office, but a major ethics violation. So is there more scrutiny now on Kim Foxx in the state's attorney's office as a result of what was released today?
There certainly could be. As you said, this didn't lead to any sort of criminal charges that Webb recommended against Foxx or anyone in the office. But he did say that he plans to send his findings to Illinois' Legal Disciplinary Office, the ARDC, and it's possible they could investigate this further and levy some sort of sanctions against Foxx or other attorneys who are handling this case. So it's possible that she could face extra scrutiny. Her office could face extra scrutiny. She issued a statement this evening saying that she respectfully disagreed about Webb's findings in regards to abuse of prosecutorial discretion, but she didn't make any mention in that statement. Her office didn't make any statement or any issue in that statement about the false statements that she and Magatz allegedly made, according to this report.
I remember when Magatz talked to you, Matt, and talked to our outlet and other outlets about their rationale for dropping that case so quickly. Very quickly, what is next for Jussie Smollett himself?
So he, of course, was convicted the week before last on 5 of the 6 disorderly conduct charges that Dan Webb's team eventually refiled against him. So with that case in the books, he is due back in court for the first time for a hearing next month. And at that point or sometime later, there's going to be a scheduling hearing set, which will happen sometime next year.
All right, still more to follow here. Matt, thank you so much.
Thanks, Paris.
And a programming note, we will be joined by Special Prosecutor Dan Webb for a one-on-one on tomorrow's program. And you can read Matt's full story on our website, where you can find a link to the report. It's all at WTTW.com/news. A reprieve for the State of Illinois building in the Loop, also known as the Thompson Center. Governor J.B. Pritzker recently announced a deal to sell the love it or hate it state building downtown to the Prime Group for $70 million. The development firm plans to overhaul the Helmut Jahn design structure rather than demolish it and start anew as others had proposed.
We took a look at the problems that have plagued this building since 1985 when it opened. And those problems we found were very manageable. And actually the problems with the building really become the opportunities to make this building iconic and special and return it to the city inventory as a Class A asset.
And joining us to talk about the future of the Thompson Center are Bonnie McDonald, President and CEO of Landmarks Illinois, and Lee Bay, a member of the Chicago Sun-Times editorial board and an adjunct professor at the Illinois Institute of Technology's College of Architecture. Welcome, both of you, back to Chicago tonight. Lee, you've been a fan of this Helmut Jahn design building for a long time. Your reaction to this new plan?
You know, it very much is kind of a stay of execution by the governor for this building. I was surprised. I mean, you know, we always thought at the Sun-Times that preservation was the most economical choice, that it was unlikely for a developer to spend $200 million, as Governor Rauner seemed to believe, for this site, demolish it, and then spend, you know, what is a skyscraper these days? You know, almost $1 billion or more on the site. The numbers didn't work, so preservation made the most sense. But I didn't think they would actually do it, retain the building. And now that it has, you know, pleasantly surprised. Some mixed feelings that we can talk about, but on the whole, pleasantly surprised.
I mean, there were even wild ideas thrown out there, like an indoor water park. Bonnie McDonald, I don't know how serious that ever really was. Bonnie McDonald, this was no sure thing. So how do you think preservation won the day in the end?
Well, I think preservation won the day because it was the reasonable option. And when you look very pragmatically at Mike Reschke's comment that he made, it's talking about time to market. Reusing a building actually allows him to get this property back on the market more quickly. And it is more cost effective because you can reuse this material, you can create more jobs. It just makes sense, as Lee was talking about.
And Lee, it's been a controversial design. You either love it or you hate it. You love it. Why do you believe it is worthy of landmark status?
You know, it like all good buildings, it captures a moment in Chicago's history. And of course, is a work of a stellar architect. And really, although, you know, the building, you know, has all the controversies that we all know, but this building really helped set Helmut Jahn's career on the path of greatness, if you will. And, you know, this was, imagine government buildings before the state of Illinois building. They had the Daly Center, which is a fantastic building, City Hall, and then this comes along, open, transparent, colorful, kind of symbolizing a new Chicago in a way. And I think that is worth capturing, that's worth preserving, and worth talking about.
Very, very populist-oriented building with the open design there. Bonnie McDonald, so this deal has the state paying a net of $70 million over the long term. I mean, they get $70 million up front, but then they pay $140 over time to keep their offices here. Is this a good deal for taxpayers? And we should note that the developer will pay for all of the renovations, whatever that's going to cost.
Well, I think that's important, what you just mentioned, Paris, is that the developer improves the building and returns, as he said, a Class A asset to our community. So not only do we get to keep a portion of that and the profits going forward, essentially, the state can still locate its offices there, a portion of the offices, where we have excellent transit access, where we have this amazing space that's inspirational. So absolutely, this is wonderful for the taxpayers and for people who love our skyline as well.
Lee Bay, I've spent a lot of time in that building over the years chasing down political figures for stories. I know the problems full well, carpets, water damage, heating and insulation problems, but tell our viewers the things that really need to be upgraded.
Well, you know, certainly the mechanical systems will have to be upgraded. I think Reschke's plan calls for putting a new exterior glass skin on the building, the one that doesn't have so much solar gain. You know, those kind of things, you know, which, you know, for a 30-year-old building, you may have to do anyway. So, I mean, the state suffered through this, but it's reached a point age-wise where these are the things you have to do to a building almost anyway. I mean, I remember the Daly Center having to go through reglazing when it turned 40. Me and the Daly Center are the same age. Daly Center and I, we both got creaky at about 40 or 35 or 40. So this kind of thing happens.
I'm closing in on that, Lee Bay, so knock on wood that things go all right. Bonnie, you know, one of the other notable features from spending time here, and I think this might have been by design, but if you go into the governor's office, you can hear everything that's happening in the building down in the in like the atrium. You've got maybe the Jesse White tumblers are performing there. That was kind of a thing that we always noticed about that building. What is a modernized Thompson Center going to look to you?
I think what we've seen so far from the architects, which is Jan, and that is the firm of Helmut Jan. So it's the original design firm that's coming back to, I think, give us a new vision for that and to, in fact, bring forward some of Helmut's original vision for this building. So we're still going to see that amazing atrium, that awe-inspiring space that you just watch people walk into that building, they look up and they look inspired. So we will keep that, but as Landmarks Illinois had put forward, to actually put a new skin inside the atrium so that it's easier to control the heating and cooling. So it still maintains that transparency that Lee mentioned, the transparency of government that was intended to be evocative in this building. We also have that wonderful plaza feeling. You can still access the CTA station, and it really does maintain the exterior to a great degree as far as the design intent was concerned. We might see a new skin, as Lee said, but you still got the original intent of the building.
And we should note for our viewers that Helmut Jan tragically died earlier this year in a bike accident in Kane County. Lee Bay, he really wanted this building to be preserved. What do you think he would feel about this deal?
You know, I would love to be in a position where he was in a position to ask, right? Because there is a bit of a disconnect by my eye, from the schematic renderings that were presented to the media by Reshke and the interiors and the kind of approach that Helmut took, was it 2 years ago, Bonnie, when he worked with you guys, where in his vision, a lot of the color was preserved and that kind of thing. I didn't see that in this. So I wonder, but I'm hoping that, you know, we're just seeing an early glimpse and that ultimately it'll tilt the right way as work goes on. All
right, Bonnie, you want to jump in on that since Lee mentioned that you had worked with him on that?
We did. We worked together to try to find a solution that would reuse the building in a way that, again, benefited the taxpayers, was a win-win for the city. And we brought forward this idea of maintaining the colors, possibly adding a tower, as we had mentioned. So I think Lee is right that we're going to take a wait and see approach in how this design continues to evolve. But we've really taken this moment to celebrate the big picture. This building, as Lee said, we tried to be optimistic, but it was really tough to be optimistic about a reuse of this building along the way of this request for proposals. So, you know, we were thrilled to see that this building is going to be reused from not only its architectural significance, its historic significance to the people, but also from a sustainability standpoint as well, and keeping that CTA station running. It's just a win-win for everybody.
All right, very interesting deal, and we'll follow as this deal closes. And our thanks to Bonnie McDonald and Lee Bay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paris.
COVID-19 symptoms like shortness of breath, extreme fatigue, distorted taste and smell, memory loss even, haven't been going away after just 14 days. People experiencing the lasting effects of COVID after more than 30 days of infection are being referred to as COVID long haulers. Many, including doctors, are still searching for treatment to these persistent symptoms. And joining us to discuss long-haul COVID and its lasting effects is Dr. Joshua Kahan, cognitive neurologist at Northwestern Medicine's Neuro-COVID-19 Clinic. Dr. Kahan, thanks for being here. So what are the most common long-term symptoms that you are seeing in patients?
Yeah, definitely fatigue is very common amongst our clinical population, also headaches, and what I specialize in, which is problems with memory and thinking.
And tell us about the work that you're doing on this at the Neuro-COVID-19 Clinic.
Yeah, so what happens is that we see anybody with neurologic symptoms after their coronavirus infection that has persisted. And when they come to our clinic, they do some initial cognitive screening. And based on their results of that, they might end up seeing me for more thorough, intensive cognitive testing. And, you know, based on what their symptoms are, what other things may be contributing, we'll come up with an individualized treatment plan for them.
All right, and earlier this afternoon we spoke with a COVID long hauler. She had COVID more than a year ago, and yet it continues to impact her day-to-day life. Take a listen.
Throughout the day will remind me to stop and take a break to refill my water bottles, stop and take a break to use the restroom, because sometimes the signal from my autonomic nervous system just doesn't send that signal to my bladder anymore. And so I would just go all day and not realize that I hadn't gone to the bathroom, to stop and take my medication, to remember to start dinner. It feels very difficult to lose some of that independence and have to depend on others.
So she's seeing some of those cognitive effects, Dr. Cahan, that you were mentioning. How do doctors treat those specific types of after effects?
Yeah, this is really, really challenging, in part because we didn't have great treatments for cognitive disorders even before this. And we're not exactly sure why some people have these symptoms for a long time afterwards and why some don't. So what we try to do, we try to identify other potential contributors such as chronic pain or sleep problems or anxiety or depression that may contribute to some of these difficulties. But we've also partnered with the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab to get these patients to a cognitive rehab and having therapists tailor a program to their specific needs to try and compensate for some of their difficulties, but also exercise certain parts of their brain that may be weaker.
All right, we also spoke with another COVID long hauler, and this person was experiencing some of the symptoms of taste and smell loss. Let's take a listen.
Now, at the same time that I was noticing things starting to regain a sense of taste or smell, I had to cut out things because all of a sudden eggs tasted like garbage, Chipotle tasted like garbage. Those strawberries from before, like now they actually taste like garbage. I can't eat them. Like all my produce in my fridge, even if I had just bought it the day before, started tasting rotten. I don't think enough young people are as scared of COVID as they need to be. Like it's not just about dying or like your kidneys failing at the age of 22. It's also about the fact that your entire daily reality could shift and you may never get your taste and smell back.
And we should mention she had COVID over a year ago as well. Dr. Cahan, how persistent are these taste and smell symptoms?
Well, unfortunately, they can be persistent for up to and sometimes over a year. A lot of people do get better, but what prevents somebody from getting better with time and what helps somebody with their recovery, we really don't know, and can be very, very, very scary.
And is there any data showing you whether this is impacting certain age groups, certain demographics, with respect to any of these side effects?
Yeah, that's really a great question, and the data that's published in the literature would suggest that people who have more severe COVID-19 symptoms are more likely to have long-lasting cognitive symptoms or brain fog and other long hauler symptoms. But there is a significant population of people who are younger without severe illness, and in fact, what many would refer to as mild illness that come to our clinic and complain of these symptoms. And I have to say that that happens to be the majority of people that I see in my clinic are people who have had mild coronavirus, but are now complaining of significant symptoms for many months and sometimes over a year.
And I want to go back to the taste and smell loss symptoms. Is there any treatment for that to get your taste or your smell back?
Yeah, unfortunately, there really aren't great treatments or therapies for this, and it's one of the most troubling aspects of this long-haul COVID syndrome.
And do doctors have any answers in terms of whether these kinds of symptoms could become chronic, or whether after a year or so that they could start to dissipate?
Yeah, I think it certainly seems like some of these things may be chronic, but time will tell, and we're still in the data gathering phase and still learning more and more about this virus and these long hauler symptoms as the weeks and months go on.
Still very early in the Omicron variant, now making something like 73% of the new cases in the U.S. Is there any study in terms of what these new variants could mean for long-haul symptoms?
Yeah, again, because we're just in such a constantly evolving information environment, it's hard to come at hard numbers. I would suspect, given how infectious it is, that there will be more people complaining of loss of taste and smell. But we'll have to see.
All right. certainly a lot more research to do on this very new problem of COVID long haul symptoms. And our thanks to Joshua Cahan for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And we're back with more Chicago Tonight right after this.
I come from a people that not only found a way to survive through the most horrific circumstances, but they thrived.
I could not save one of the boys of color in my own life. If my family could be exposed to this horror, then really it could happen to anyone. We are truly all in this together.
And there's much more ahead on the program, including the mayor's answer to combating a surge in violent crime. But first, a landscape artist is ditching the dirt for some more formal paintings in a new series called 100 Zoom Portraits. Arts correspondent Angel Ito introduces us to the artist and her portrait of 100 portraits.
What started out as 300 screenshots of Zoom interviews from her favorite newscast has since transformed into a declaration of the times.
I started because I could only watch the news on my phone. The bigger screens were just too much. And I could also cover up what I didn't want to look at with my hand while I was watching the news. It was during lockdown. It was intense. But I don't know that we suddenly got to look into each other's homes. You know, famous reporters or the people they were interviewing, and I took comfort in that, and I started doing screen captures. So I'd never worked from photographs before, but there was something there.
As someone who has never painted portraits, Megan Williamson never expected to complete 100 of them.
One day I walked in, and there were about 20 on the wall, and I really thought for a moment, my friends are here.
Without realizing, she developed a routine that gave her solace and comfort during a time of uncertainty.
In a way, I feel like I was partnered with these people, even though they don't know it. When I was painting from the photographs, and I'd have multiple, I wasn't copying the photograph. I felt like I was climbing into their homes. So I would start noticing things when I was painting that I didn't notice just when I did the screen capture. I can't remember everybody's name, but I could tell you everything about what is in their room or what they were wearing.
From February to May, Williamson made one portrait a day. She recreated living rooms across the country, even a few guests seen on Chicago Tonight. And despite growing in popularity, Williamson does not intend to offer them as individual portraits.
I do think of this as one piece. The 100 pieces are one.
Williamson says it's about a communal connection.
To see them all together, I hope, is like the best Zoom call you've ever been on. Our shared humanity, we were all looking into these screens. That's why we're here. We're here to make connections. And the look on that I chose to paint is they have just spoken or they're listening. And I feel like, you know, we're all doing so much yelling and not listening. This is just this moment of being present, and to see 100 people being present makes me really happy. Makes me feel like it's a hopeful series.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
Williamson hopes to have 100 Zoom portraits debut in newsrooms across the country. Visit our website to see more of the portraits close up. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, downtown residents, brace yourself for rent hikes. That and more business headlines from Cranes. Mayor Lightfoot's calling on the federal government to step up in curbing Chicago crime. We have details on her proposed new strategy. We talk with local astronomers about the launch of the James Webb Space Telescope and what it means for space exploration. Plus, theater critic Hetty Weiss makes some recommendations for shows on stage and has the latest on some recent cancellations. But for some more of today's top stories, you can add ambassador to former Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel's resume. The U.S. Senate voted early Saturday morning to confirm Emanuel as President Joe Biden's ambassador to Japan. The vote was 48-21 to confirm Emanuel, whose nomination was opposed by some Democrats and Republicans. 31 senators did not vote. Emanuel was one of more than 36 ambassador nominees that were confirmed after a Republican blockade on the diplomatic nominations led by Texas Senator Ted Cruz. The state's COVID-19 cases are at the highest level in a year. Illinois public health officials are reporting more than 12,000 new cases, which is the largest one-day increase in 2021. There were 11 additional deaths reported. And there have been more than 1.9 million total COVID cases, including 27,228 deaths in the state since the pandemic began. The 7-day statewide test positivity rate is 7.1%, a jump up from 6.2% on Friday. Some Illinois workers are set to see a raise in the new year. The minimum wage in Illinois is set to go up by $1 to $12 per hour on New Year's Day. Governor J.B. Pritzker signed legislation in 2019 that puts Illinois on track to have a $15 an hour minimum wage by 2025. Chicago's minimum wage is already at $15 for employers with 21 or more employees. Amtrak cranks up the speed. BMO Harris's parent company agrees to buy a San Francisco bank for billions, and gone are the days when renters had the upper hand over landlords as the rental market bounces back. Here to go behind the headlines is Crane Chicago business editor Ann Dwyer. Ann, always great to see you. So that Amtrak route from Chicago to Springfield to St. Louis, how much quicker is it going to get?
Well, they're jumping from the typical 79 mile per hour service to 90 miles per hour, thanks to a lot of track improvements that have taken place over the past couple of years. And the upshot is that at 90 miles an hour, Paris, an Amtrak trip from Chicago to St. Louis is now competitive with how long it takes to drive, even with the stops along the way. And that's always been kind of a competitive challenge for Amtrak in this market. Now, that said, we're still a long way away from true high-speed rail on that line. I mean, we're talking, to be truly high-speed, you're talking 110 to 200 miles per hour. We're not there yet. It would take billions of dollars of infrastructure investment to get there. But this is a step in the right direction for people who are really eager to see rail alternatives in the Midwest.
So it might be the equivalent of driving from Chicago to St. Louis, about 5 hours or so. All right, the other story you have, BMO Harris, the Chicago bank, their parent company is going to purchase a San Francisco-based bank for more than $16 billion. So what does that mean for BMO?
Well, it means, first of all, that when they complete this deal, which will be the largest one in banking in the United States this year, BMO will be on the map of one of the industry's major players. But in a more practical sense, Paris, it means BMO is now among the ranks of the so-called super regional banks with the potential to dominate banking activity in the entire western half of the United States. That this deal gives BMO for $16 billion a major foothold in California and other fast-growing West Coast markets. They're going to get a footprint of more than 500 branches out there, and that potentially is truly transformative for BMO.
It just seems like the banking industry is always consolidating into a few mega banks across the country. All right, lastly, red-hot rental market across the city. More rent hikes expected for next year. Do we know by how much?
Yeah, rents at downtown apartment buildings, anyway, in the Loop and the immediate environs, could rise by as much as 5 to 7% next year. Because of the simple law of supply and demand, Paris. There simply is more demand than there is supply in that neighborhood right now. And the analysts we spoke to for our report today tell us that that situation isn't likely to change in 2022, which is fascinating because it does tend to run counter to all of the memes and themes that we hear about downtown living right now. There are people who really want to live in the central area, and they're willing to pay top dollar to do it.
Yeah, and the mayor, of course, addressed high crime today, but it certainly at this point, given the data, is not repelling people from wanting to live in the Loop or nearby. All right, Ann, thank you so much.
Thank you, Paris.
And speaking of that, Chicago has surpassed 800 homicides for the year, with yet a week and a half left in 2021. There were 23 shootings this weekend, several of which were fatal. And it's against this backdrop that Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot this afternoon went on the offensive. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with the latest. Amanda.
Yes, Paris, this afternoon, Mayor Lori Lightfoot giving voice to what a lot of people are feeling, or perhaps trying to give assurance to them, and that is people are scared with shootings, carjackings, and of course the pandemic. She says emotions are high.
I know that people for whom violence is a daily concern are particularly stressed, and that more recently violence is creeping into other neighborhoods that have not historically been burdened by violent crime. As a mayor of the city, I want to assure you that from day one in my time as mayor, public safety has been, is, and will continue to be my highest priority.
One of her solutions, keeping more people who are accused of violent crimes behind bars. Lightfoot says it defies common sense that thousands of individuals who are charged with crimes have been released from jail while everyone is presumed innocent until proven guilty. She says at this point, neighborhoods are up for grabs.
But if you are charged with killing someone, trying to kill someone, taking a vehicle at gunpoint, rape, or violence against someone in your home or theirs, for those people, I absolutely believe that they should be locked up pending trial because they are demonstrated, quote unquote, real and present threat to the physical safety of people and community as defined under Illinois state law.
Lightfoot calling for a moratorium for electronic monitoring, therefore, of course, keeping those individuals behind bars if they are accused of crimes like homicide, murder, rape, carjacking. She says that monitoring is supposed to come with supervision, but that isn't happening.
In Cook County, there's virtually no supervision, nor any mandated community interventions. The Cook County electronic monitoring system is fundamentally broken in a way that is making our city unsafe. The county courts need to get the balance back and reserve electronic monitoring for only nonviolent offenders.
Unclear exactly how this moratorium would work. Mayor's office not responding to a request for comment on that, but she did talk about sending a formal request to Chief Judge Tim Evans, who says that he has not received that from Lightfoot. In a statement, though, Evans saying that violence is both a local and a national problem and that he shares the mayor's concerns about it. He did not directly respond to a request for comment on this general sentiment and really critique by Lightfoot of the system. But Cook County Public Defender Sharon Mitchell does. He says that the mayor's plan is regressive and would disrupt communities.
We know that the proposal around bond are clearly unconstitutional, given that every single person is entitled to an individualized hearing specific to their case. And quite frankly, it would result in the incarceration of an untold number of people who are innocent and did nothing but be accused of a criminal offense.
He points out that the mayor calling not just to keep in jail those who've been accused of a violent crime, like using a gun, but also those accused of illegally having one.
So this idea that we're going to start punishing people just based upon an allegation by the Chicago Police Department, we believe will not only explode the jail population, not only will cause a number of innocent people to be incarcerated, but it will do nothing to actually keep our community safe.
Mitchell has advocated for decriminalizing illegal gun possession. Now, Lightfoot in her speech, as she has before, called for the opposite. She says she is pushing for state legislators to crack down on so-called ghost guns, but only the feds, she says, have the ability to stop illegal gun trafficking between states. Lightfoot adds that she is making a formal ask of the U.S. Department of Justice to send more agents in Chicago to help.
Our city is simply awash in illegal guns, and sadly, has been for years. There are many reasons for this that set us apart from other cities in the country. And the resulting harm is showing up in our streets, in emergency rooms, in morgues, and funeral homes every day. And it is threatening not only our residents, but our police officers as well.
Now, the mayor, by the way, says that she does have $1 million that is set aside in reward money to help people who come forward to help police solve any of these illegal gun crimes. Now, going forward, she also wants more license plate readers installed, calling these cameras a game changer. Critics do question the effectiveness of that technology in solving crimes. Lightfoot says these tactics, they're part of a solution. And she says that violence and crime are manifestations of deeper problems, so not the only solution. As previously announced, she also plans to devote a record amount of city money to go toward impoverished neighborhoods and to community organizations.
They are the offspring of poverty and neglect and the psychological trauma that comes with it. It is the kind of poverty and neglect that too many communities, like Garfield Park and others on the south and the west sides of the city, have endured for decades.
Another plank of the mayor's plan is something that she's previously talked about before, and that is going after gang leaders' profits. But there has not been support on the city council for this civil asset forfeiture plan. The mayor today indicating that she's got something fresh up her sleeve, perhaps an updated version, but there were no details disclosed about what that might look like. And she did not answer any questions from reporters following this afternoon's address. Paris, back to you.
Clearly, Amanda, a lot of local leaders that have been at odds, like the mayor, state's attorney, the judges, they're going to have to put their heads together on a lot of this plan to solve this intractable problem right now. All right, thank you very much. And up next, local astronomers share some up-close details on NASA's powerful new telescope, so please stay with us.
Coverage of science and technology on Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Joel M. Friedman, president of the Alvin H. Baum Family Fund.
Christmas is coming a day early for astronomers. This Christmas Eve, the most powerful space telescope ever invented will be launched. The James Webb Telescope is over 20 years in the making, and scientists are saying it could be a time machine for galaxies. And joining us now with more are Wendy Friedman, professor of astronomy and astrophysics at the University of Chicago, and Mark Hammergren, an astronomer and planetary scientist at Farther Horizons. Welcome, both of you, to Chicago Tonight. Mark Hammergren, this telescope has been in production or planning since 1996 at a cost of $10 billion or more. Tell us why this has been such a long, drawn-out, and expensive project.
Well, quite simply, this is the most complex piece of machinery that I think NASA has ever built and hopes to put into space. There are millions of pieces and components that all have to work together perfectly. It's not just a matter of buying things, it's a matter of designing and building and assembling and testing. So everything has to work perfectly.
And Wendy Friedman, give us a sense of how much on pins and needles scientists are right now as this telescope is going to be launched into orbit on Christmas Eve, given all the things that have to go right for it to work.
Yeah, and NASA is saying that there are 340, more than 340 possible single point failures. And so to give you one example, this thing is going to be launched in a rocket. It's going to fly by the moon. And then you have to deploy a solar array and then a sun shield, which will protect the telescope, keep it cool. And this sun shield has 5 layers. It is the size of a tennis court, and each one of the layers is the width of a human hair or less. And so everything has to spring out, roll out and spring out into place. And if it doesn't, the telescope doesn't work. So it's nerve-wracking. It's incredibly exciting, but it's really
And once this gets launched into orbit, of course, the purpose here is to look at galaxies far, far, far away. Mark Hammergren, what potentially could be seen through this new telescope?
Well, the distant universe is one of the focuses of work by this telescope. And so by looking in the distant universe, you can also look back in time. So astronomers have a time machine with any kind of telescope. And the better the telescope, the further back you can look. Hopefully, we can get a good picture of the very early stages of things like the formation of galaxies, the era of formation of the first stars. That'll be just a fantastic thing to look at. And then more nearby, looking at extrasolar planets, planets around other stars, finding them. Yeah, maybe characterizing them, figuring out what they're made of and what their atmospheres are made of. That would be fantastic.
Wendy Friedman, what kinds of discoveries are you looking forward to possibly being privy to with this telescope?
Well, I think the ones Mark has just mentioned are fantastic. I mean, we will look at the cosmic dawn, and there's even a possibility, it's remote, but a possibility that we could find evidence for life on another planet. For my own research, our group is trying to understand the universe and how fast it's expanding, and whether or not we understand all of the components that describe the evolution of our universe. And so this fantastic new machine with its high sensitivity, high resolution will offer us a glimpse of the universe in a way that we have never had access to before. So any region, any area of astronomy right now, if you talk to an astronomer, there's something that I think will be there from James Webb. And anytime astronomers have built new telescopes, which is why I think you're hearing this excitement from us, we've made new discoveries in astronomy when we get new technical capability and a new facility like this. So it's just tremendously exciting for all areas in astronomy.
And Mark Hammergren, you both mentioned that this can look way, way back into the past, millions, if not billions of years, galaxies that were perhaps formed right after the Big Bang. What can we take away from this to learn about our own planet, our own solar system, our own Milky Way galaxy?
Yeah, I think you've really hit the heart of what we hope to get from astronomy in general, is by exploring the universe, by looking at our own solar system, we gain a better insight into our own place in the universe. So not just in terms of, practical things like, cheaper gasoline or something like that, but the big questions that humans have wondered about ever since there have been humans. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Are we alone out there? And this telescope may give us a better view, a better answer to some of these questions than we've had before.
Wendy Friedman, you mentioned you're going to be looking at how fast the universe is expanding, or whether we need to change our idea of that. Is there anything that might be revealed about the Big Bang that to this point hasn't?
Well, to this point, we understand that the universe is expanding. We've learned in the last couple of decades that the universe is filled with a substance called dark matter, matter that doesn't shine, doesn't emit light, and a form of dark energy that's causing the universe to speed up in its expansion. And the way that we test what we now call the standard model for describing the evolution of the universe is to make really accurate measurements of this expansion rate. And so we have hints that maybe we're missing something in this current model. And the James Webb Space Telescope will have the capability to allow us to make more accurate measurements and see, are we missing something? And that, I think, will be very exciting.
All right, very exciting Christmas for scientists and astronomers upcoming. Fingers crossed for this mission. And our thanks to Wendy Friedman and Mark Hammergren. And up next, what shows you can and can't catch on the stage this season. But first, we take a look at the weather. Many theaters in Chicago are open for business this holiday season, but there have been a growing number of canceled performances. Joining us now with some reviews and the latest on what's going on is theater critic Hetty Weiss. Hetty, great to see you. Let's start out with the general state of affairs in Chicago's performing arts community. Obviously, New York, Broadway shutting down, the Rockettes shutting down. What is the situation here?
Well, you know, it changes from moment to moment, and that's really part of the tricky thing. Something, you know, they can close for 2 days, they can all get retested, and everything is fine. But I think psychologically, for both the audience and for the performers, it is so stressful and in many ways very sad, because when they come back in the last couple of months, there's such a wonderful connection between surprisingly big audiences and the performers who are so happy to get back on the stage.
Yeah, our hearts go out to everybody involved in the performing arts industry. Let's start with a tradition here. Joffrey Ballet's Nutcracker performed for the first time now at the Civic Opera House. What's your read so far?
It's actually the Lyric Opera House.
I'm sorry, the Lyric Opera House, the Civic Opera building, Lyric Opera.
Yeah, and it looks beautiful on that stage. And they shut down for a couple of performances this past weekend. You know, that's terribly sad, because so many families and kids come to these performances, and it's a beautiful production, and it looks especially good on the Lyric stage, which is the first time that they're performing it there. And I would say, you know, the best thing to do, my best piece of advice for all of the shows we're going to talk about, is to call the box office and just double check before you leave the house, because, as I said, it can all turn on a dime. And
the Joffrey previously performed at the Auditorium, now at the Lyric, of course, its new home. What is it like in that venue?
Well, it's this beautiful Art Nouveau theater, and the stage is just, it feels bigger, and it's also more modern, and I know the dancers love it backstage even more. It looks beautiful, and if you haven't seen the production, it's such a fabulous combination of multimedia and puppets and beautiful costumes. And the thing that everybody should know is, for the remaining performances, and they only run through the 26th of December, every dancer is going to be masked while they're dancing.
Interesting.
So that is that's a challenge.
Absolutely. Next up, Sister Act at the Mercury Theater. They've had some cancellations, as I understand. What's their status?
They've had a couple. They're coming back on the 29th, 30th, 31st, and 2 performances on the 2nd. And actually, we are using their stage right now. You know, most people have seen the movie. It's a very funny, but also very touching musical, fabulous performances, wonderful dancing. You know, I think if you can see it, you really should try to go see it.
Absolutely. Looks like a lot of fun. Of course, the music is amazing. Kiss Me Kate, the Cole Porter classic, that's a production you really enjoyed. What's going on with them right now?
This is up at the Marriott, and they've had to also cancel some performances. They're coming back on December 29th, and they're running through January 16th. So you'll have a little bit more of a range. And also, I should say that, you know, the box offices in all of these places are very understanding. You know, they probably reschedule you to the extent that they can. And, you know, that they're doing the best they can. Kiss Me Kate, of course, is a music, Cole Porter's brilliant musical version of The Taming of the Shrew. Again, fabulous dancing. I'm really impressed with the dancing in all of these shows, even if they're not ballet companies. And a great score, very clever, and you know, I think it's really worth seeing, and it's not revived very often these days. So it's a nice opportunity to catch a really great classic musical.
And Marriott Lincolnshire, known for putting on really big and very national level productions there. Next 2 shows haven't had any cancellations, knock on wood. You're a big fan of Mr. Dickens' Hat. That's a world premiere at Northlight. What is the story there?
Well, the story there, you know, it is not a Christmas Carol, but it is an homage to Dickens in a very, very clever way. And it deals with a lot of the themes that Dickens dealt with, which is, you know, larger than life characters, and also debtors' prisons and social inequity and the set. I have to say, you walk into that theater and you go, what is going to happen on this set? It's a brilliant set. The performers are terrific. They do everything. They also sing and dance and move, and a very touching love story and some sort of dry comedy as well. I think it should have a real life in future, and it doesn't have to be a Christmas show. It's Charles Dickens, and he's eternal.
Of course, but maybe a new holiday classic there.
And maybe a new holiday classic. It could very well be. Very charming and very sophisticated show, I think.
And finally, 8-track, The Sounds of the 70s, which features live musical from the me decade. So what type of music are we talking about from the 70s? Soul, rock and roll, R&B, disco?
A mix of everything. All the 1970s classics, from ballads to pop songs. And what's so brilliant about this show is the way it was worked out, is that they take all of the great songs from the 70s. There are about 50 songs or fragments of the songs, and they put them thematically. So, obviously this was the Vietnam War era, this was sexual revolution era, feminist era, and they're all sort of, each song becomes a little bit of a scene and a character study and also a historical study. And the voices are fabulous. And again, the dancing is terrific.
All right, so many fascinating productions. We should mention that's at Theo Ubuque. Yeah, and let's hope that they just can continue because so much great work being done. And Hedy, thank you so much as always.
Thanks, Paris.
And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Monday night. Please join us tomorrow night live at 7. And join WTTW News correspondent Joanna Hernandez tonight for our next Latino Voices virtual community conversation. She's speaking with community leaders about the diversity of holiday traditions within Chicago's Latino communities. That's tonight at 8. And visit WTTW.com/events to RSVP. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz. We're glad you joined us. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great night.
Closed captioning is made possible in part by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, wishing all a happy and healthy holiday season.